My name is Ekaterina and I'm from Moscow, and today I'm doing this video for educational purposes. This is my home assignment for Coursera course, which I am taking at the moment. And I decided to give a little talk about speaking. What makes a good speaker? Who are good speakers? You might recall Hitler was a brilliant speaker, or Fidel Castro, a good speaker, or you can talk about lots of politicians who are wonderful speakers, but what actually makes a good speaker? Especially if this person is a non-native speaker of some language. So if you think about speaking, you might start thinking about that a good speaker would have his grammar fine and won't have any grammar mistakes, and there won't be any lexical mistakes, and there will be correct words, and everything would be correct. And this is just one aspect of speaking, and this aspect of speaking is usually called grammar accuracy. So it's always accuracy. So accuracy means everything is fine in terms of grammar and possibly vocabulary. So this is accuracy. However, you might have met quite a few people who don't make mistakes in their speaking, but all of a sudden you understand they are not very fluent. They are not very proficient in language or in speaking. This could be very simple language, or they might have very long pauses in between, or they might have with a very strong accent, for example. This is also a possibility. People can speak fast and grammatically correct, but with a very strong accent. So the second point here is grammar accuracy or vocabulary accuracy is not enough, and you should be talking about another aspect, which is fluency. Okay? So the second one would be fluency. Fluency is actually a phenomenon which is quite difficult to pin down, and fluency, in general, fluency is known as natural language use, or in general this is how native-like you are, how close you are to the high standard of native speakers. Usually by fluency we understand the ability to speak at length, without pauses, so you don't stop in between, you have long and complex sentences. So this is called lexical density. You use quite a few words in your speaking, and you don't have inappropriate pausing in between. So semantically dense sentences, this is our second point. And third characteristic of fluency would be ability to have proper things to say in a wide range of contexts. For this, I can give an example. If you are meeting a queen or a president, you don't want to start a conversation with "Yo, Queen of England, yo," this is inappropriate language. And if you don't know that you are not allowed to use such language in a formal environment, then you cannot be called a fluent speaker of any language, if it's be it your first language or your second language. In broad sense, language fluency is something. It's a phenomenon when you don't make many pauses, when you use words correctly, when you know how to use them. But in narrow sense, fluency is when your language is smooth and you speak relatively fast. So these are two aspects, smoothness and speaking fast, and they are very important. And actually, quite a few researchers, they have tried to run research and to pin down fluency, and they were recording lots of strings of words and speeches, and with native speakers, non-native speakers, were trying to identify different aspects of fluency. And they have found quite a few characteristics or quite a few criteria which could be used for fluency or to measure fluency. So one of the criteria would be mean length of pauses. You might have noted that quite a few people need long pauses between sentences or between phrases when they need time to think. Usually when somebody makes a pause in speaking, it means he or she is thinking, processing. This means that people need time, this means they need more time, on average more time than a fluent speaker, and this is one of the characteristics of non-fluent speaker, long pauses. Second characteristic could be phonation or time rotation. Basically, percentage of time spent on speaking. Also, this is called sentence length, or sometimes they call it a string length. We don't speak in words, we use phrases to speak. We don't use individual words in speaking. Usually we have combination of words, chunks, phrases. And a rule of thumb could be, the longer the chunk is, the more fluent you are. Of course, you should not exceed, and of course you should be thinking about appropriacy in this case, but usually novice speakers, they would be talking in very short phrases. For example, they need some time to think about next phrase. Again, this combination of pausing between phrases and how many words you have in one pause, in one chunk. Also, this is called length of the run, so a run length. Another characteristic, or another way to talk about fluency or to measure fluency would be articulation rate. And this is very technical. This is total number of syllables produced per minute, excluding pause time. So what researchers do, they record your voice, they count how many syllables you have, and then they see how much time you spend on these syllables, and they exclude your pausing time. This is very technical, but again, they have found some timing for natural speaking and for non-natural, for unnatural speaking and non-fluent speaking. And again, the rule of thumb would be native speakers or fluent speakers, they tend to have faster speech, which means they would have more syllables per minute, for example. Next characteristic of fluency would be speech rate and pace, and this is number of stressed words per minute. You might know that we don't speak just with words, but with phrases, as I have already said, but also these stressed words are called prominent words, and they're very important because these prominent words, they bring meaning to a sentence. Usually it is enough to get the idea of these prominent syllables or prominent words, so you could understand the sentence, the idea of the speech. You don't need all these fillers in between. You don't need articles to understand the meaning. You don't need prepositions. You don't need prefixes. Usually it's just prominent words, it's stressed words. So the number of prominent words, the number of stressed words, it gives you a general idea how fluent you might be, or how fluent you are. And again, for this, what researchers do, they record some of the speech, say a couple of minutes, and then they count how many stressed words, how many prominent words, how many stressed syllables you had within 1 minute, for example, so a given period of time. And one more characteristic, one more indicator of factor for fluent speaker, it would be field pauses. For example, non-native speakers and novice speakers, they tend to have very long pauses between meaningful sentences. Expert users, native speakers, they tend to fill these pauses, and they use fillers. They use fillers, for example, this could be, where this could be fillers like this type of fillers. Sometimes we use them, and some researchers, some researchers even measure the length of these fillers to identify a person's fluency. And in this case, the longer the filler is, the less fluent the speaker is, generally speaking, or maybe less prepared in this context. So we have mentioned just a couple of characteristics, which you can couple of factors which you might take into consideration when talking about fluency, and these were mean length of pause. This is very interesting and very important. So the pause length. Then this is the mean length of runs. So how many words you have per run between the pauses. And this is speech rate, how many words or how many stressed syllables you have within minutes. And then field pauses, if you have a filler, or if you have some extra word in between with the words which you don't actually need to convey the meaning. Now, What can you do to improve your fluency, to make your fluency slightly better, to make your speaking skills slightly better? So you can actually work on accuracy, because accuracy comes hand in hand with fluency, and also accuracy and fluency, this is a combination of chunks. But also what you can do, you can work solely on fluency. And to do so, you need to understand what happens in our heads, in our minds, when we talk, when we speak. So there are three different stages, and major stages. And the first stage would be conceptual preparation, conceptualization. This is when you get this idea of what you're trying to say. You don't put in words yet, but you just have this idea, you have this message which you want to convey, you want to pass to the listener. And this is called concept, and this is the level of macro planning. Okay, so this is the idea layer, so the outer layer with macro planning. The second layer, the second stage, would be formulation, and this is micro planning. This means you will be working on certain aspects of language, such as word choice, grammar. You remember I was saying that fluency comes hand in hand with accuracy. So formulation, microplanning stage, this is the second stage. It comes with grammaring, and so grammatization, when you're thinking about correct grammar, then not making any mistakes, then about words which you would like to use in your speech. Maybe syntax composition, maybe some knowledge, and maybe some facts, data, and you're actually articulating this. So this is formulation. And then and this is still the silent stage. First two stages are silent, and then you have your articulation stage. And during your articulation stage, you actually pronounce these words, and you work on pronunciation. Basically, you use your organs of speech to articulate these words, and you work on articulation of individual sounds and chunks and sentences. You work on pauses, and you choose appropriate prominence, appropriate stress, and you choose appropriate intonation. For example, if you're thinking about if you're thinking about a question, at your second stage, you might remember that you start a question with do, and then at your third stage you will be, and at the second stage you will have this: do you have any ideas about what is going on? So this is a string of words, and you have it in your head, in your mind, and this is just the second stage. But at your third stage, you will put it in your mouth, and then you will have this uprise intonation, then fall, and then you will start with do, because the grammar coming in. So do you have any idea what's going on? And you connect these words into one huge chunk. And this is the third stage. And interestingly, you can work on these three different stages individually. I will just write down these three stages for you real quick. So the first one, and so this is the idea stage. So you have this little light bulb. Yeah, and this is the idea when you have it. So the second stage, this will be grammatization, when you have this logical bricks and ideas coming in, the string of words combining. And if this is a question, you start with do. If this is exclamation, you might have some exclamation mark at the end if you're writing it later on. And then finally, depending on what you had in your first and second stages, you would have your articulation, and this is when you actually talk and say words out loud. So this is actually you talking out loud. Yeah, so this is the third stage. I think it is important to take these stages individually if you're working on fluency. Quite a lot of exercises has been done at this stage, because this is connected to grammar, but not much, and sometimes we take this in isolation when we work on pronunciation, when we learn chunks, when we use drilling or repetition when we drill questions, for example, or individual words. But also what can be done, you can take this in isolation, then you can combine them. So this is what you can do with articulation. Of course, you can articulate words individually, and you can think about words pronounced individually, but also you should possibly think about phrases, so focus on chunks of words. And this means that you, at the very beginning, when just pre-planning, and at your second stage, when you're thinking and when you're planning your speech, you should be thinking or planning not just with your individual words, but with word combinations, with chunks, with prefabricated patterns. Also, at this stage, you should demonstrate the features of connected speech and pausing. Pausing is also very important, and I remember reading an article when it has been said that expert users, they don't just use pauses in general or randomly, they have pauses in at very specific times when speaking at length. Finally, actually after all these three stages, you might have a fourth stage, and this will be very true if you are learning your second or third or fourth language. And this would be monitoring stage. At this stage you control things. At this stage you go back and you control yourself, your mind, saying, oh, I made a mistake. And then you go through self-correction. This could be repetition, this could be self-correction, this could be just a pause, and then you go on. But you constantly monitor what you've just said, and sometimes it takes time. So this influences fluency also, and you should, I think you should be aware of this. A couple of things which you should keep in mind when working fluency, working on speaking in general. It has been proved that native speakers and expert users of second languages, they use several strategies when they speak. And the first strategy would be communicative language tools. And they use pragmatic tools, paralinguistic features. For example, they smile, or they pause, or they use gestures. This is called paralinguistic because this is not linguistic. But this helps to communicate, and people use this. Sometimes it is used as compensation tool, and I believe this also results in fluency, because instead of just giving many words one at a time, you smile and you articulate and you have your gestures and body language, you have a little dance, and then all of a sudden people perceive you as a more fluent person. So I think it is important to use paralinguistic features as well. What proficient or expert users do, they use different strategies when, or compensation strategies when giving a talk. They use fillers and pauses. And a non-expert user would be saying, huh, or just thinking. An expert user would say, yeah, let me think. Or, well, I'm not actually sure. Yeah, as far as I remember, what could be this one? Yeah, probably, yeah. This type of language. And these are fillers, and it is perfectly okay to use fillers in your speech, and that gives your listener the impression that you're a fluent user of language, a fluent speaker, because all of us, everybody needs time to process information, to come up with an answer, to come up with all these 3 or 4 stages. And this is very important to show that you are fluent or fluent in some language to your listener, and this means that you should be using some of these strategies. Also, what you could do, you could use some clarifying strategies. You can go back and say, oh, by this I meant actually, and you clarify what you've just said. And when you're repeating words, in your brain you're still going on, in your mind you're still moving, and you're still thinking. So by going step back and clarifying things, basically what you're doing, you're buying yourself time for further development, and this is how actually you have extra time for thinking and for this process which are going ahead. Okay? So to wrap it up, I just want to tell that we've just discussed briefly the different aspects of speaking, and we've just covered 2 major topics, and I just mentioned that you might be talking about accuracy and fluency when you start thinking about speaking or develop your speaking skills. But also we've just talked about fluency and different types to measure fluency, and these were length of run or speech rate, things like this. And of course I told you that there are 3 different stages which are happening in your mind before you actually start speaking, and these stages would be, first of all, conceptualization, general idea, then you have dramatization, grammar, structuring, and then finally articulation. This is pronunciation, intonation, linking, prominence. And also I give you some piece of advice how you can develop your fluency, and the major advice would be use compensation strategies. Thank you very much. See you next time. Jana.